Good morning. Welcome to today's episode. We're going to cover something I wasn't really expecting, but since we're in this subject, it's really a good idea to address it here. Today we're going to cover diabetes, one of the most destructive diseases out there that has so much misinformation about it. People have no idea what's causing it. And since they don't know what's causing it, they do all kinds of crazy things to try and manage it that absolutely make no sense at all and are not going to help at all. So we're going to cover what sets the stage, what causes it, how it's perpetuated, and what really needs to happen to manage this so that you no longer have it again. So this is Your Health Reclaimed, where we expose the root causes of fuel, Lyme, and all chronic illness so you can finally heal, to help you understand and heal the root cause of Lyme and chronic illness so you can reclaim your health and restore your life. I'm Dr. Brad Montagne, a veteran functional medicine doc. We've been helping people that have been to multiple other doctors, never got any help, get them well again. We have an extremely high percentage of that happening, and consistently for 4 decades. So let's jump into this. I'll start off with this story because I think this is really an important one. I've had several people over the years that have brittle diabetes, type 1, insulin dependent, and the insulin won't manage their sugars. A couple of the most remarkable of those was, one was a young girl. Right now, I don't remember if she was 13 or 15 years of age. Had blood sugar problems. She went to the local medical docs who told her, don't worry about what you eat. We'll manage your sugars with insulin. Now, that's not the wisest statement to say, because you should clarify before you say something like that. So I saw her sometime after much time down the road, I don't really remember. But in taking history, I find out that this young girl, she's between 13 and 15, somewhere in there. Every day she comes home from school, and she binge eats sugar to get her blood sugars to 750. Yeah, you heard me right. 750. That's nuts. That's absolutely nuts. That's like 3 times a lethal level in a lot of people. And I got all kinds of backlash about telling her that was completely irresponsible, and she needed to eat in a more responsible way. A ton of backlash. That was crazy. And as soon as the backlash happened, you explained to people what you did, and it's like, oh, sorry, I didn't know that. Because all they heard was a 13 to 15-year-old girl complaining that I told her she couldn't do what she's doing. Didn't say what I said or why. And those medical doctors should have been in trouble for that one. They really should have. We had another one. She was mid-40s to early 50s, somewhere in there. Been on insulin for quite a while. See her every once in a while. We deal with something, and she wouldn't finish whatever that was, and she'd move on and come back a long time later. So when she came in this time, I said, if nothing else, we need to get you to the point where you can manage your sugars with your diet. She was absolutely, totally unresponsive to insulin. It didn't change her sugars one bit. She's kind of desperate. They were way, way, way too high, and she understood how dangerous they were. So I got her attention with that. We started working on diet. She quit using her insulin because it wasn't doing her any good at all. And the doctors told her to use insulin according to what her sugars were. And since it wasn't responding, she had quit. She quit. I don't remember, but she quit. The interesting thing, when she quit, her sugars dropped. Actually, they were already dropping when she quit. And we got her to manage her blood sugars in the 80s. You heard me right. In the 80s, low to mid 80s, ongoing just with diet. And before we started, she was brittle diabetic. So let's get into what sets the stage for this. It's not generally by eating sugar. As a young girl, that was over the top, and that was absolutely a problem. But we've been talking about gut dysfunction being the root issue that creates toxicity inside the body. And last podcast, we went over how that dysregulates the HPA axis. So the HPA axis, one of the biggest targets in that is the adrenal glands. Your adrenal glands control your stressed blood sugar, your postural blood pressure, your kidneys, inflammation. With inflammation, they're the master gland over your immune system, because your immune system only responds to two things. That's inflammation and antigens. So it's one of the major controlling organs over your immune system. It makes your anti-inflammatory hormones, cortisol and adrenaline is a class of hormones. And adrenaline is way, way, way stronger than cortisol. And they make the precursors to all the sexual hormones, pregnenolone and DHEA. So whenever we have a toxic overload, that creates an inflammatory response, and the cortisol and the adrenaline, they jack up through the roof. The more chronic this becomes, the more burnt out the adrenals get, to the point where they're just going to pump out all the cortisol they can, whether there's a stimulus or not. Once the cortisol release becomes chronic, something that's always there, its response reverses. Instead of calming down inflammation, it creates it. Yeah, you heard me right. Long-term release of cortisol will create inflammation instead of reduce it. And one of the side effects of cortisol and adrenaline, so it creates the long-term release of both of those, is that those two hormones go in there in an inflammatory issue. They go target the muscles and they start to dissolve your muscles. The technical term's autolysis, but you don't need to know that. And they start to dissolve your muscles to release amino acids. Those amino acids get liberated in the bloodstream. They go to the liver, and there's some stimulus that goes on inside the liver. Pancreas releases a hormone called glucagon, and glucagon creates another big word, gluconeogenesis. What it does, it makes new sugar out of the dissolved muscle parts called amino acids. And those sugars jack your blood sugar up through, it's to reach the heavens. There's no sight in the end. The reason for that response is with a high cortisol and adrenaline response. They usually happen from life-threatening dangers. And if we have a life-threatening danger, we need superhuman strength and superhuman speed. To do that, the blood sugars go through the roof to supply the body with all the energy needs it does to defend its life. So these sugars are going through the roof. And as they go through the roof, the pancreas puts out another hormone called insulin. And all insulin does in this whole thing, it doesn't stop the production of sugar. All it does is try and take the sugar that's in the blood and dump it into the tissues, primarily to make fat. So you add insulin and sugar together, insulin and cortisol, adrenaline together makes the sugar elevate. It stimulates a bunch of other things in the body that we could get into, but I'm not going to right now. The rising of the sugars with these, it's like a manic response. I mean, they're shooting for the moon with no end in sight because they don't know when these sugars are going to end. The cells, they start to respond less and less and less. When this happens repetitively in close succession, the cells respond less and less to the insulin, and the cells get full of sugar. They respond less and less to the sugar or to the insulin, and that ceases to drive the sugar into the tissues. So we have elevated blood sugars, which is what diabetes is. That's not a direct response by eating sugar. That's a hormonal response from something stressful, something inflammatory. Toxins are on the top of the list for inflammatory issues. So we're right back to the gut being one of the root issues with this. And quite a few years ago, I started doing DOT physicals. You got to go through a bunch of education and do that. And one of those educations is to study a bunch of classes of drugs that are very highly likely to impair a truck driver's ability to go down the road in a safe manner. One of those drugs that was on there was metformin. Metformin is the number one drug here in the West, especially in the US of A, where people are given metformin in prediabetes and type 2 diabetes. And we got to know what it does. This was the first clinical affirmation of what I've been telling people for years, right staring me in the face. Metformin stops the gluconeogenesis, hopes to stop, slow down at least. The gluconeogenesis goes on when the cortisol and adrenal levels are too high. That's its job. So that lets you know that the pharmaceutical companies know what causes disease, and whether your medical doctors paid attention to what it's doing and spent any time in their physiology book so they can understand that doesn't matter. The metformin, its only purpose, its only way to reduce blood sugars is to stop the liver from making sugar out of the dissolved muscle amino acids. They're liberated from the adrenal hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. So let that sink in for a bit. It's cortisol and adrenaline. They're primary causes of jacked up blood sugars. That's called diabetes. So that kind of blows a whole bunch of people's ideas up in a pretty big way. So let's back up and look at what the dietary factors are that create this, because it's critical to know. Sugar is inflammatory. No doubt about it. The more processed it is, the worse that inflammation is. But we test people on a huge class of sugars, from agave to stevia and xylitol. We got cane sugar, beet sugar, brown sugar, white sugar, fructose, you name it. We've got a bunch of sugars. The response to all of them is the same in almost everybody. If they got a problem with sugar, they got a problem with every one of them. Stevia is no better. One of the big problems with stevia, they add erythritol to it. And all your artificial sweeteners like NutraSweet, those dysregulate your blood sugars. So they're not a good thing to do. So agave does the same thing. Stevia does the same thing. Stevia has erythritol in it. So does most monk fruit. Monk fruit would be pretty clean if you could find it without the erythritol. Because erythritol is just makes it toxic. So sugars are certainly on the list. But the things that are on the list of causes inflammatory nightmare are things that a lot of people aren't aware of. Processed fats, hydrogenated fats, overcooked fats, all those are on the top of the list for causing inflammation. So a lot of people know nuts are really healthy. They are if they're raw. As soon as you cook them, you hydrogenate the fats, you make those fats tolerant to every cell in our body. Creates inflammation. Your nuts have to be raw to be healthy. You take fry oils, they're all hydrogenated. And with that, they've got cottonseed oil in it and a few other things that are extremely, extremely toxic. You look at canola oil, and they've got to just nuke that stuff to get it so it's palatable. And it's really toxic on top of that. Your corn oil, anytime you concentrate any product off of corn, you concentrate the herbicides and pesticides they grow it with. Atrazine is 10 times worse than Roundup, and it's at a higher concentration in corn products than Roundup is. So all your corn oil is full of Roundup and atrazine, and that doesn't work. The only really clean oil out there is extra virgin olive oil, and there's only a few brands that are good as far as that goes. Trader Joe's Poor Spouse, the cheapest, cleanest one you can get here in the US of A that I know of. Processed carbs. Those are going to be another source, because processed carbs, they'll jack your blood sugars up and create inflammatory issues. Are often combined with hydrogenated and overcooked oils. Rancid oils a lot of the time, that'll do it. Somebody I know, another natural doc, took two of his brothers out to lunch, said, I'll take me anywhere you want to go. They want to go to McDonald's. He said, okay, I'll take you to McDonald's, but you got to eat food the way that I tell you to eat it. So they got their meals. French fries was part of it. And he says, okay, take a French fry and put it in your mouth, start chewing till I tell you to stop. They start chewing, and all they taste is the salt, and they're going, boy, this is good. Tell them, keep chewing, keep chewing. After 30 seconds, the flavor of the salt went away, and all they could taste was rancid oils. One of the brothers, after a short period of time, it was less than 5 minutes, I don't remember how long I was, threw up at the table. And I don't think either one of those brothers ever ate at McDonald's again. So oils are really on the top of the list. You take deep fried foods, that's going to always be the case. Doesn't matter what it is, those oils are just rancid. Your processed carbs, usually they combine with rancid and bad oils. If we take a look at your processed flours, your bleached white flours, you've taken all the nutrients out of the flour, and all you got is carbs left. They're ground to a small pulp, and the more you process a starch, the faster it converts into sugar, and it's just like eating regular sugar. So that's a problem too. You need a whole grain, and A whole grain has the hyaluron layers, which is where all the fiber is, the germ, which is the embryo of the plant, and the starch. A processed grain just has the starch. Most of your whole grains only have the hyaluron layer and the starch. They don't have the germ because the oils in the germs go rancid in 3 hours at room temperature. So anytime a germ is exposed in a grain, as soon as you crack it and crack the hyaluron layer, as soon as you do that, there's a 3-hour window where if you don't get that in a refrigerated or freezer section, the oils are going rancid. So these are some of the real key things about diabetes. So let's capsulize all this. It's primarily HPA dysregulation in the adrenals that jacks up the blood sugar through cortisol and adrenaline to create diabetes. You can manage your sugars even when you're brittle, insulin-dependent diabetic by diet alone. It's the inflammatory products in the diet that create this issue. And you never, I'm going to do this caveat, you never ever want to quit your insulin without being responsible in monitoring things. Your medical doctor will tell you how to administer your insulin according to your blood sugars, and you need to follow those instructions. As you change your diet to lower your sugars, you need less and less and less. And it can get to the point where you don't need any anymore if you manage them properly. So don't forget that one. That one's critical. This is Your Health Reclaimed. I'm Dr. Brad Montagne, veteran functional medicine doc. We release these every Monday and Thursday. We'll share this with a friend. Put a like on this. Give some reviews out there. Have your friends put some reviews and share this around so we can get this out to more people. Thanks. Have a great day.